Hello again, students. Welcome back to our lesson. Welcome back to our class. Today we are going to learn about how we can give more information when we are making descriptions in the present simple. We have studied the present simple before, and we have mentioned that the present simple is to talk about facts, routines, general description of people, of things. So when we are describing things and using the present simple, we can make our sentences, we can give more information in our sentences by including relative pronouns and also relative clauses. Now, what is a relative clause, or how can we include more information in a description in English when we use the present simple? We can use that using a relative clause, and a relative clause is a part of the sentence that give us more information that is important about the person or the thing or the subject that we are talking about in the sentence. So a defining relative clause give us essential information that tell us who or what we are talking or referring in the sentence. For example, she is the woman who cuts my hair. The part of the sentence, this phrase, this clause, who cuts my hair, all this part, it's clarifying something about the woman, right? I'm describing or explaining or defining who the woman is, right? So she's the woman who cuts my hair. I'm being specific, I'm giving essential information about the woman, right? I have another one. That's the stadium where Real Madrid play. I'm describing the stadium, I'm being specific about the stadium, and I'm describing specific information about the stadium. Where Real Madrid play, all that part, all that section, it's a relative clause. And this relative clause, it's important in the sentence, right? It's not every stadium, it's not any stadium. It's not a stadium for baseball, it's not a stadium for any other sport. It's a very specific one that I understand because of the relative clause. Now, the relative clause, we can include a relative clause in the sentence using pronouns. And the pronouns are going to help us connect the subject with the description. The woman with the description, cuts my hair. The subject or the place, stadium, with the second part, which is the description, Real Madrid play. Now, the pronoun that we decide to use in the relative clause, it's important because it should coincide with the subject. And the pronouns that we use, we put them at the beginning of the relative clause or in the middle of the sentence, and they refer to a noun that appears before. So they connect. For example, Alice is the student who is always on time. Subject, Alice, the student. Who, the relative pronoun. Always on time, the relative clause or the description. An elephant is an animal that lives in hot countries. Same example, same order, same parts, same idea of using a relative pronoun with a relative clause. Let's go to a country where the sun always shines. And the reason why I came here today is not important. Now, you can see that in each of the sentences, in the 4 sentences, I'm using a different pronoun for different subjects. So I'm using who, I'm using that, I'm using where, and I'm using why. We do this because, remember again, the relative pronoun must coincide with the subject. So depending on the subject is the pronoun that I am going to use. So there are pronouns for people. There are pronouns that I use for objects or things. There are pronouns that I use when I refer to places, to time, and to reason. For people, I use who. For objects or things, I can use which or that. For places, I can use where. For time, when. And to explain a reason, I can use why. There are many other ones, but I think these ones are the most important ones. And I have here a table that is more complete. But I think that the most important ones are who, that, which, where, when, and why. This table is more complete, but you can check the table later if you need it for reference. Okay, so remember, we use the relative pronouns to connect the subject with the description that we are making. There are some things that we need to consider when we are writing relative clauses and including relative pronouns. The first thing is that we cannot eliminate the relative clause in this type of sentences because it's essential. It's part of the sentence, and if we eliminate this section, this clause, the sentence now is incomplete. So check the first example. Alice is the student. Okay, which student? Or what are you talking about? So you see the definition, the description, the relative clause is important. We cannot eliminate that. So most of the time when we use defining relative clauses, we need the relative clause. So we cannot remove the relative clause. Now, the pronouns who, sometimes whom, and which, right, can be replaced by that. Remember that we said that we use who for people, but you can replace who and use that, even when that refers to objects. That's possible, especially in spoken English or in informal English, right? So when we're speaking with friends, when we're writing something that is not very formal, that it's in a familiar language, in a colloquial language, we can replace that, right, by who, or who, sorry, by that. So for example, Alice is the student that is always on time. We know that we use who, but we can put that. The dish, which, but I can put that. The dish that I ordered was delicious. The man that came with her has already left. So I can substitute who and which by using that. It's possible. Remember, that's for informal English, spoken English, very colloquial. If you're writing something that is formal, an essay, an article, or you're giving a presentation, a conference, something like that, try to be formal and try to use the correct pronoun. And finally, the last thing we need to consider is that we do not need to repeat the subject in the relative clause. This is a very common mistake some students do. That in English we know that we need a subject for verbs, right? And most of the time we think that the subject is I, you, he, she, Maria, Pedro, something like that, right? It can be a pronoun or a person. But remember that who, that, when, where are pronouns, and pronouns are subjects. So you don't need to include a subject because the relative clause has a subject. The subject is who. The subject is where, which, when. So Alice is the student who, subject. If you put she, because you feel that you need a subject for Alice, you are repeating, and that's not necessary. Actually, it's incorrect. So you don't need to put she for is, right? So who is the subject? Who refers to Alice? Remember that the pronoun refers or coincides, matches the subject in the sentence. So remember that it's not necessary to repeat the subject. So those are important things that we need to remember about the relative clauses and relative pronouns. So, in conclusion, a relative clause gives us essential information. We normally use relative clauses to make our sentences more complex, to make our sentences more specific. They give us information that tell you who or what we are talking about, and we use pronouns to refer to the subject in the sentence. Those pronouns coincide and connect the subject with the description that we are making. That's it about relative clauses. Hope this information is useful. Thank you very much for your attention, and see you later.